The gun was already pointed at the little girl's head when Iris saw it. Time did not slow down the way people always said it would. There was no strange stillness, no voice rising up from somewhere deep inside her chest to tell her what to do. There was only the black sedan with the tinted windows, the hard glint of chrome catching the afternoon sun, and a 7-year-old girl standing 3 feet away, completely unaware that the world was about to end. Iris Calloway had been sitting on the low brick wall surrounding the Saturday farmers market for the better part of 2 hours. Her sketchbook was balanced on her knees. Her stomach had been growling since 9 in the morning, and it was now past noon, but she had made her choice at the corner store on the walk over, standing in the aisle for longer than she should have, holding a fresh pencil in one hand and a wrapped sandwich in the other. She had put the sandwich back. She always put the sandwich back. Food was temporary. The work was the only thing that lasted. That was what Professor Aldridge had told his advanced drawing class before the scholarship committee rejected her application for the third time in a row. Insufficient portfolio diversity, the letter had said. As though diversity were something you could manufacture out of thin air, as though it didn't cost money, canvas, time, stability. Things that Iris Calloway did not have in any reliable quantity. She was 22 years old and a junior at the University of Arizona, and she had been poor her entire adult life in the specific grinding way that comes not from bad choices but from bad luck, arriving at the wrong moment. Her parents had died in a highway accident 4 years ago, a rainy November night on I-10 outside of Phoenix, and what they left behind was not enough to cover the funeral and the outstanding balance on the house where Iris had grown up. She had sold everything that could be sold, deferred her first semester of college, worked double shifts at a diner on Speedway Boulevard until she had enough saved to register for classes, and then she had registered and kept working and kept drawing and kept applying for scholarships that went to other people. She was not bitter about this. Bitterness required energy she didn't have to spare. She was simply clear-eyed about the arithmetic of her situation, the way people get clear-eyed when they have been living inside tight margins for long enough that calculation becomes instinct. She pushed her black frame glasses up her nose and looked out at the market spread before her. It was a perfect Arizona morning in late October, the kind of day Tucson did better than almost anywhere else on Earth. The sky was that particular shade of blue that looked almost too vivid to be real, like someone had painted it on purpose and then stepped back to admire the effect. The mountains in the distance sat low and purple against the horizon, the Catalinas and the Rincones holding the city in a loose embrace that felt on mornings like this almost protective. Between the stalls selling sunflowers and raw honey and hand-carved mesquite bowls and small-batch hot sauces, families moved at the unhurried pace of people who had nowhere else to be. Children laughed. Couples held hands. A man in a straw hat argued pleasantly with a woman over the merits of 2 different varieties of apple, gesturing at each one with the earnest enthusiasm of someone who considered this a matter of genuine importance. The world moved in full color, and Iris sketched it in shades of gray. She had filled 11 pages already. A vendor's weathered face caught mid-sentence the lines around his eyes deep enough to suggest decades of squinting into southwestern sun. The curve of a child's arm reaching up for a balloon, the fingers splayed with the particular urgency of wanting something just out of reach. 2 old men playing chess on a folding table near the entrance. Their concentration so complete they seemed to exist in a separate dimension from the noise around them. The board between them, the only thing in the world that mattered. Iris liked drawing people who were fully inside their own moments. People who didn't know they were being watched. There was something honest about them that posed subjects never had something undefended and therefore true. She had been told more than once that her work was technically proficient but emotionally distant. One professor had written on a critique that her drawings showed excellent observation but insufficient investment. She had thought about that for a long time. She thought that what the professor meant was that her work didn't perform. Emotion didn't announce its feeling in the ways that certain kinds of art did. What she was actually doing, which she had never found the right words to explain, was trying to get close enough to the truth of a thing that the emotion was simply there, present in the accuracy itself, the way a good photograph doesn't need a filter, because the light was right to begin with. She was working on a study of a woman nursing a baby in the shade of a canvas awning, the woman's posture suggesting a tiredness that had moved past discomfort into something more fundamental, a kind of endurance that had become its own variety of strength when the man walked into the market and changed everything. She felt him before she saw him. That was the only way she could describe it afterward, in the weeks of recovery when she had time to turn things over and examine them from different angles. A shift in the atmosphere, some subtle recalibration of the space around her, the way a room changes when someone opens a door to the outside, and the pressure differential adjusts. She looked up from her sketchbook and he was there just inside the market entrance, standing still for a moment in the way of a man who always stopped to read a room before he entered it, and for a moment all she could do was stare. He was enormous, at least 6'4", built like something that had been assembled rather than born, with shoulders so broad they blocked the light behind him. A thick, dark beard covered most of his face, shot through with gray at the jaw, that suggested he was somewhere in his mid-40s. Tattoos ran up both forearms and disappeared into the sleeves of his black t-shirt before climbing again above the collar to cover most of his neck in patterns she was too far away to read individually. He wore a leather vest over the shirt, and even from where Iris sat, she could read the patch on the chest clearly. Hell's Angels, MC, and below it in a rocker that curved like a smile with no warmth in it, a single word: President. Iris had heard stories about the Hell's Angels. Everyone in Tucson had. Professor Aldridge had warned his students away from the east side of the city more than once, where the club's compound sat behind chain link and razor wire like a fortress that the 20th century had forgotten to tear down. There were stories about bar fights that ended in the hospital and occasionally not at the hospital, about debts that were collected in ways that didn't involve courts or lawyers or any of the other institutions that ordinary people relied on to keep the world orderly. About bodies found in the desert outside of town with no particularly compelling explanation attached to them. She should close her sketchbook. She should look somewhere else and pretend she had never noticed him and go back to her study of the nursing woman and the quality of afternoon light on canvas. She didn't. His eyes swept the market with the efficiency of a machine, cataloging exits, measuring distances, assessing every face in the crowd with a speed and precision that made Iris's skin prickle with something between fascination and unease. This was not a man who had ever stopped paying attention. This was a man who had survived in a world that required constant vigilance precisely because he never let his guard down, never allowed himself the luxury of assuming that any environment was safe until he had personally verified it. Then he looked down. A little girl with blonde pigtails was holding his right hand, bouncing on her toes with the barely contained energy of a child who has been walking at an adult's pace for longer than she considers reasonable, tugging him toward the far end of the market where a hand-painted sign read, "Rosie's Ice Cream," in looping red letters. She wore a pink dress printed with small yellow butterflies, the fabric bright in the October sun. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. And when she looked up at the giant beside her and said something Iris couldn't hear from this distance, tilting her face up with the absolute confidence of a child who has never once doubted that the person beside her was listening, his entire face transformed. The hardness left him like water leaving a cloth when you wring it out. Every line of tension, every carefully maintained edge dissolved. His mouth curved into something unguarded and real, something that had nothing to do with performance or calculation or the management of other people's perceptions. He bent at the waist so he could hear whatever the girl was whispering, tilting his enormous head with the focused patience of a man who considered whatever this child said to be the most important information currently available to him, more important than anything else in the market in the city in his day. Then he laughed, a real laugh surprised out of him by something she had said, the kind of laugh you can't manufacture and can't suppress. Iris's pencil was moving before she had made any conscious decision to draw him. The contrast was too precise, too complete, too exactly the kind of thing she had been trying to capture all morning without finding it. The creature of leather and deliberate menace, the man whose eyes had just cataloged 50 strangers for threat potential, reduced to absolute gentleness by the small hand wrapped around two of his fingers. She She caught the angle of his shoulders as he bent down the particular curve of a large person, making themselves smaller for a child. She caught the way the little girl stood on her toes to reach his ear, one hand still gripping his, the other pressed flat against his arm for balance. She caught the smile that was still on his face when he straightened back up the remnant of it, the way a real smile lingers. She worked quickly the way she always worked when something true was right in front of her, the lines coming without hesitation because her hand knew what her eyes were seeing, even when her brain was still processing. This was the thing she could never explain to the professors who said her work was emotionally distant. The hand knew. When the subject was true, the hand simply knew. She added the detail of the three men who had materialized from the crowd around them without any apparent signal. She had noticed them a few seconds after she started drawing, and the sight of them sent a cold thread of awareness threading through her chest. They wore the same leather vests. They moved in a loose formation around the man and the girl, maintaining a perimeter with a naturalness that suggested years of practice, close enough to respond, far enough not to crowd. Their eyes never stopped moving. Their hands stayed close to their sides, near pockets and waistbands, in a readiness that had become habitual. This was not random. This was organization. This was protection detail. Whatever this man was, he was important enough that he did not go anywhere unguarded. And whatever that meant, the girl beside him seemed completely unaware of it. She was simply with her father at a Saturday market wanting ice cream. The girl tugged him toward the ice cream stand, and he followed without negotiation, without the hesitation of a man weighing options. He just went because she wanted to go. Iris watched him watched him pull a worn leather wallet from his back pocket, thick with cash, and hand it over without looking at the denomination. Watched him hand the cone to the girl with the solemn ceremony of a man presenting something precious. Strawberry. 2 scoops. The girl received it with both hands and immediately began to lick it with the concentrated devotion that only small children bring to ice cream, each lick deliberate and complete. Iris added the patch detail to the drawing, the angel wing tattoo visible on his left forearm, the way his head was turned, watching the little girl eat, utterly absorbed in this ordinary moment. She worked on the shadows next, the way the afternoon light came at an angle through the market's open sides, and caught the chrome detailing on his belt, the silver rings on 2 of his fingers, the edge of the patch letters. She was building something here. She could feel it, the kind of drawing that would be worth keeping. The kind that showed something real about people, about the distance between what they looked like and what they actually were. She was adding a final detail, the way his hand had dropped to rest lightly on the girl's shoulder. Not restraining, just present, just there when the girl's face crumpled. The cone slipped from her fingers. It happened in the suspended, inevitable way that small disasters always happen, the moment between the fumble and the fall, stretching just long enough for everyone nearby to see what was coming and be helpless to stop it. The pink cone turned in the air once, as if uncertain about the direction of gravity, before hitting the hot pavement and splattering strawberry ice cream, spreading across the concrete in a shape that was almost beautiful for a half second before it was just a mess. The girl's lower lip trembled, her eyes filled with the specific brightness of tears about to fall. And then she was crying with the complete uninhibited grief that small children have not yet learned to be embarrassed about, the kind of crying that makes no concession to audience or circumstance. The man was already moving. He dropped to one knee in front of her, right there in the middle of the market on the hot pavement between a stall selling lavender sachets and a booth offering handmade candles with elaborate labels. He didn't look around to see who was watching. He didn't hesitate. He pulled a folded handkerchief from his vest pocket, the kind of item that felt anachronistic and somehow exactly right for him, and began to wipe the girl's face with a gentleness that his hands did not look capable of. He was talking to her in a low voice, and Iris could not hear the words from where she sat, but she could read the shape of them in the way his mouth moved, and the way the girl's shoulders gradually stopped shaking. Something reassuring, something calm, something that acknowledged the loss without minimizing it, and then offered a way forward. The girl hiccuped. He waited. He kissed her forehead. Then he stood, took her hand, and walked back to the ice cream stand and bought her another cone. Strawberry again. 2 scoops. And this time, when he handed it to her, he kept his own enormous hand loosely cupped beneath hers as they walked ready to catch it if it started to slip, not taking it from her, not controlling it, just being there beneath it. Iris sat very still and looked at what she had drawn. It was probably the most honest thing she had put on paper in 2 years. Not technically the most sophisticated, not the most ambitious, but the most true. She had captured the precise moment when his face had changed that instant, when the dangerous man had become something else entirely, something that existed outside the category she had initially placed him in. She had drawn him the way the little girl saw him, with the unself-conscious accuracy of a child who only knows what she actually sees, not the version filtered through reputation or fear or the accumulated weight of other people's opinions. She had drawn him as a father. Just that. A father at a Saturday market in October doing what fathers do. She reopened the page and added one more detail. The way the girl's small arms had wrapped around his neck when he knelt down and the way his eyes had closed when he held her. Not a performance of comfort, but the real thing. The way a person's eyes close when they are holding what matters most to them and don't need to look at anything else in the world for just this moment. She should go. She knew she should go. She had been sitting here long enough, and she had what she came for. And the smart thing to do was to put the sketchbook away and walk back to her apartment on the other side of campus and eat whatever she had in the refrigerator, which was probably not much, and work on the assignment she had due Monday. She didn't go. She was adding shadow work to the underside of his jaw, deepening the contrast between the hard lines of his face and the softness of his expression when she felt it again. That shift, that recalibration of the atmosphere. Only this time it was not warmth that moved through the crowd around her. It was cold. The man's head came up. He had not heard anything that she could identify. He had not seen anything as far as she could tell. But something in him had registered a change in the environment with a sensitivity that went beyond ordinary human awareness. Some instinct sharpened by years in places where missing such signals had permanent consequences. His body didn't move, but everything inside it did. She could see it happen from 30 feet away, the ease leaving him, the father disappearing, the president coming back. The transformation happening in the space of a single breath. His right hand moved to the little girl's head and pressed her face gently but firmly against his shoulder, turning her away from the parking lot. He said something to her, one quiet sentence, and she pressed into him without question. The three men in the protection detail reacted without a signal she could see. They spread apart subtly in a way that looked like nothing to anyone who wasn't watching for it, repositioning to cover more angles. One of them, the lean one with a tattoo running up the back of his skull, began moving through the crowd in a low, urgent voice, asking people near the street-facing side to move toward the interior of the market, making it sound like nothing, a routine precaution. His manner calm enough that most people simply complied without asking why. Iris followed the man's gaze to the parking area. A black sedan with fully tinted windows was pulling slowly into the lot off the main road. It moved wrong. That was the only way she could frame it. Every other car in that lot was moving with the purposeful casualness of people arriving to spend a Saturday morning buying organic produce and homemade jam. This car moved the way a predator moves when it has already identified its target and is simply closing distance, patient, unhurried, certain. The three men's hands were no longer near their pockets. They were at their pockets. Iris's pencil had stopped moving. The sketchbook sat open on her knees. She watched the sedan pull to a slow stop at the edge of the parking area, angled toward the market entrance, with a precision that felt deliberate, and she watched the rear window begin to descend. In the seconds before the gun appeared, she had a strange and specific thought. She thought about the drawing she had just made, about the look on his face when his daughter had whispered in his ear, about the fact that she had been sitting here for 2 hours invisible and overlooked, sketching a world that moved through her field of vision without noticing her in return. And the only true thing she had managed to draw all morning was this man's love for this child. This particular, specific, enormous love which he carried around in the middle of all the other things he carried, and which transformed him completely every time he looked at her. The barrel came through the window. It was a small weapon, black and compact, the kind designed for concealment, and then for doing a great deal of damage very quickly, the kind that turned the ordinary afternoon air around it into something different, just by being present in it. It swung in a smooth, practiced arc, and Iris's eyes tracked it with a horrible, involuntary clarity following the line from the barrel to where it settled. The little girl in the pink butterfly dress, still pressed against her father's shoulder, still unaware, her small hand curled in his, the ice cream strawberry 2 scoops held loosely at her side. The man saw it. He was already moving, already trying to turn his body between his daughter and the gun, shifting his weight, beginning the rotation. But he was holding her on his left side, and the gunman was on his right, and the angle was wrong, and the movement was going to be half a second too slow. A calculation Iris made without knowing she was making it, her brain running the geometry and the time it took her to exhale. She ran, not away, toward. She did not decide to do this in any conscious way that she could ever afterward adequately describe. Her body made the decision before her mind had finished processing the situation, a response that bypassed deliberation entirely and went straight to motion. She was off the brick wall and moving across the hot pavement before the thought, "I should do something," had fully formed her sketchbook, still somehow in her left hand, her feet finding the gaps between market-goers with a speed she didn't know she had. 20 feet, 15, 10. The gunman's finger tightened. 5 feet. Iris launched herself forward with everything she had, both arms out, every ounce of momentum aimed at the child. She hit the girl squarely and wrapped both arms around her small body and twisted in the air on pure instinct, because some part of her understood without instruction that her back needed to be between the barrel and the child, that this was the only configuration that made sense. They landed. The world tore open. 3 shots. The sound was not what she had expected, and she had not expected anything, had not had time to form an expectation. But the reality of it was enormous and brutal and immediate. Not the clean, cinematic crack of movie gunfire, but something that felt less like a sound than like a physical restructuring of the air itself, a concussive pressure that she felt in her chest and her ears and the base of her skull simultaneously. She felt the pavement come up and meet her. She felt the girl beneath her alive and screaming, which meant alive. And for a fraction of a second, that was the only information she needed. Then she felt the other thing. It arrived just behind the sound and the impact, which was how she understood later that she had already been hit before her nervous system had caught up to the fact. It began at a point just below her right shoulder blade, approximately where she would have reached if she had tried to scratch a spot between her shoulder blades, and it expanded outward from there in a white heat that unmade every other sensation in her body. Not pain exactly, not yet, more like pressure, like weight, like something had moved in and was rearranging the furniture of her interior to accommodate itself. She tried to breathe and found that the mechanism was not working correctly. Something that had been functioning automatically for 22 years was now requiring conscious effort and producing diminished results, like trying to run a program on a computer that is simultaneously running out of memory. Above her, she heard a sound she had never heard before and would carry with her for the rest of her life. A roar, not a shout, not a yell, not the sound of a man expressing anger or surprise or pain. A roar from somewhere below those things, from somewhere below language and thought, and the civilized management of feeling from the place where the animal that precedes all of that still lives. The sound a living thing makes when what it loves most in the world is threatened, and the threat is real, and the response is not chosen but simply erupts. More shots, but different from different angles from the protection detail returning fire. Glass breaking somewhere behind her. The sedan's engine rising to a scream and then receding, fast tires on asphalt. Running feet, many of them in multiple directions. Then there were hands on her. Careful despite their size, careful in the way of someone who has been trained or has learned through experience that care and urgency are not opposites. She was being rolled gently but with purpose onto her side, and the hot pavement moved away from her face, and she found herself looking up at a sky that was still impossibly that same vivid shade of blue. That painted-on blue that she had noticed this morning when she was just a girl at a market with a sketchbook, and then a face came between her and the sky. Storm-colored eyes, the exact gray of the sky over the Catalinas, when weather is building the gray that means something is coming. And inside them, behind the gray something she had not expected to find, in the face of a man with a record she couldn't have known, and a reputation she had only heard at a distance. Terror. Not anger, not the focused calculation of a man managing a crisis. Pure, undisguised human terror. The kind that cannot be performed because no one would choose to perform it. Stay with me. His voice had lost whatever it usually used to maintain its command, the layer of authority stripped away and replaced with something rawer underneath. You hear me? Stay with me right now. Look at me. Right here. The little girl was crawling out from beneath her. Iris could feel small hands on her arm, patting at her in the desperate, helpless way of a child who knows something is wrong and is trying to fix it with the only tools available, which are small hands and the will to help. The girl's pink dress was dark down one side. It took Iris a slow, suspended moment to understand that the darkness was her own blood. You saved me. The girl's voice was barely above a whisper. She was close to Iris's face, close enough that Iris could see the tears tracking through the dust on her cheeks, the blue of her eyes enormous and wide, and attempting to make sense of something that didn't have a framework yet. You saved me. Iris wanted to say something, wanted to produce the reassuring sentence that the situation seemed to call for something to make the child's face stop doing what it was doing. But the air was not cooperating, and the white heat in her back was sharpening into something more specific, and the edges of everything were beginning to go soft in a way that had nothing to do with lighter focus. The girl Iris managed. Her voice was her own, but barely. The girl. She's safe. His voice broke on the second word. A fracture in it, just a small one, but she heard it clearly. Because of you. You hear me? She's safe because of you. Safe. There were tears on his face. She could see them even as her vision narrowed, cutting tracks through the grime on his face, through the dust, in the gunpowder residue of an afternoon that had started as a Saturday market and become something else entirely. A man who looked like he had arranged his entire life so that nothing could make him cry crying. You saved my daughter. His voice was rough and low and fractured. My daughter. Iris thought about the drawing, about the 11 pages she had filled this morning, and the 12th that she had been building when everything changed. About the look on his face when he had bent down to hear what his daughter whispered. About the way his eyes had closed when he held her. She had seen something true, and she had drawn it, and then she had put herself between it and the thing that wanted to end it, because some things were true enough to be worth that. Some things were worth the cost. She thought with the distant precision of a mind that was slipping, but had not slipped yet, that this might be the most important thing she had ever done. Not the scholarship applications, not the portfolio, not the assignments and the critique sessions, and the long hours of practice that had built her hand into something that could capture what her eye saw. This, 30 feet of pavement, in a choice that had not felt like a choice, because there hadn't been time for choice, only for the body's knowledge of what mattered. The darkness came in from the edges the way it had been threatening to come for the last-minute patient and absolute. The last thing she heard was his voice, broken open and desperate, stripped of everything that usually lived in it all. The authority and the control and the deliberate menace, everything that had built a world afraid of him gone, leaving only this. You're going to be all right. You're going to be all right. I swear to God, I will not let you die. Do you hear me? You don't get to die. I will not allow it. The blue sky closed over her, and there was nothing. Cole Maddox had seen men die. He had seen men die in every way that men die, quickly and slowly, with dignity, and without it, with things left said and unsaid, and things that should have been said years earlier and would never be said now. He had seen it in bars and warehouses and on the sides of desert roads in the deep dark of 2 in the morning when the only witness was the sky. He had carried some of those deaths with him for decades, images that came back in the quiet unbidden. In the particular silence of 3 in the morning when the house was dark and Lily was asleep down the hall, and there was nothing between him and his own accounting. He had made a certain kind of peace with the ledger of his life. Not comfort, not justification, just the understanding that you lived the life you chose, and the life you chose had a cost, and you paid that cost every day without pretending it wasn't there. But in 45 years of living in a world that had never been gentle with him, he had never seen anything like what this girl had just done. She had been sitting on a brick wall. He had noticed her peripherally the way he noticed everything filed her as a student with a sketchbook. No threat, no relevance moved on. She had been invisible, the kind of invisible that some people were, when they didn't demand to be seen, when they sat quietly and observed rather than performing their own presence. She had seen the gun. He was absolutely certain of that. The trajectory of her approach, the angle of her final launch, the deliberate twist in midair that put her back between the barrel and Lily, that was not accident or reflex. That was a choice made in 2 seconds by someone who understood exactly what she was choosing and who made it anyway. She did not know him. She had never met him. She didn't know about Vincent Hargrove or the Diablo or the 8 months of Cold War that had just gone thermonuclear in a farmer's market on a Saturday afternoon. She had no reason to care about his daughter, no connection, no obligation, nothing. She had been sitting on a brick wall drawing pictures in a cheap sketchbook, and she had seen a child in danger, and she had run toward it. Cole pressed both hands against the wound in her back and felt her blood moving hot and fast against his palms, and told himself with the same certainty that had moved him through 45 years of situations that required certainty rather than hope that she was not going to die. He was not asking. He was not hoping. He was stating a fact that he was going to make true through whatever means were required, the way he stated all the facts that mattered. "Get the truck," he said it without looking up. Viper was already moving before the sentence was finished. Around them, the market had become chaos. People streaming in multiple directions, some running for the exit, some frozen in the particular paralysis of people who have never been close to gunfire before, and whose bodies have not processed that the danger has passed. Some calling 911 with the frantic efficiency of people who are grateful to have a defined action available to them. His protection detail had formed a perimeter weapons visible now, scanning the lot for a secondary approach that would not come because the sedan was gone. 2 of his brothers had already mounted their bikes and were moving in the direction the car had fled, tires loud on the market's entrance road. Cole kept his hands on the wound and looked at the girl's face. She was young. He had registered her as a student, but up close, she looked even younger than that, 22 at most, with dark hair and skin going the wrong shade of pale at a rate that told him things he didn't want to know. Her glasses had come off when she hit the ground and lay a foot away on the pavement, one lens cracked. There was a small scar above her left eyebrow, old, the kind from childhood. She had paint stains on the fingers of her right hand. Faint blue and yellow worked into the skin around her knuckles in the way of someone who painted frequently and didn't always wear gloves. The sketchbook had fallen from her hands when she jumped. It lay open on the pavement 2 feet away, and Cole's eyes went to it and stayed. It was him. Him and Lily in graphite on the page, rendered with a skill and care that made his throat do something unexpected. She had drawn the moment at the ice cream stand, the exact moment, the tilt of Lily's head, and the angle of his own, as he bent to hear her, the expression on his own face that he could not have described but recognized instantly as the face he only had for Lily, the one he didn't know was visible. She had drawn him the way Lily saw him. Not the president, not the patch and the history and the reputation, the father. She had looked at him and found the father and drawn him with such precision that it felt like being known. And then she had saved his daughter anyway. "Daddy." Lily's voice very small, coming from somewhere near his left arm. He turned. She was standing beside him, her face doing things that 7-year-old faces should not have to do. Her pink dress dark down one side with blood that was not hers. "Is the drawing lady going to be okay?" "Yes," Cole said. He put every ounce of the certainty that had carried him through everything that had needed carrying into that word. She's going to be okay, princess. I promise you. He had made 3 promises in his life that he would do anything to keep. The first was to his mother dying, that he would not let the life he was living get Lily hurt. He had been trying to keep that one ever since. The second was to Lily herself the night she was born too early and too small in that hospital in Phoenix, that he would be whatever she needed him to be. The third was the one he was making right now to this girl bleeding on the hot pavement of a Saturday farmer's market, who had saved his daughter's life and didn't even know her name. A truck skidded to a stop beside them. Cole directed his brothers to lift her with the care required, and they did with a gentleness that their hands and their history would not have suggested, but that they produced anyway because he required it. He climbed into the truck bed, positioned himself to keep pressure on the wound, and told Viper to drive like the hospital was on fire. Lily, she was standing on the curb, arms wrapped around herself, watching. Baby, come right up front with Lyle. I want to stay with her. Lily's voice cracked. I want to help her. You are helping her, Cole said, by staying safe. Can you do that for me right now? Can you be that kind of brave? She looked at him with her mother's eyes, the blue that still caught him off guard 4 years after her mother had been taken from them. Too old suddenly in a 7-year-old's face. Then she nodded, and Viper lifted her and put her in the passenger seat, and the truck lurched onto the road. Cole kept pressure on the wound throughout the drive and talked to the girl, even though she could not hear him because the alternative was silence. And silence felt like conceding something he was not going to concede. He talked about Lily, about the afternoon she was born, about the first time she had laughed, about the way she had asked him last week to explain why the sky was blue, and he had not known and had stayed up reading about atmospheric light scattering until 2 in the morning so he could tell her at breakfast. He talked because the girl had given him back the morning and the afternoon and all the years after that, and he owed her every word. St. Mary's appeared ahead. Viper drove across the hospital lawn and through a flower bed and stopped at the emergency doors. The trauma team was already coming out. Someone had called ahead. Cole gave the attending physician everything he knew in 15 seconds. Gunshot wound, upper right back below the shoulder blade. Bullet still in. She had stopped breathing on the way he had given rescue breaths, and she had started again. The physician started issuing orders before he had finished. They took her through the automatic doors. Cole stood in the late afternoon sun with her blood on his hands and on his jeans and felt something he had spent 20 years engineering his life to be free of. Helpless. Lily slipped her hand into his. She had gotten down from the truck without him noticing and was standing beside him looking at the doors that had closed on Iris Calloway, her jaw set in a line that was pure, her mother a line that said she had decided something. She's going to be okay, Daddy, Lily said. It was not a question. Cole looked at his daughter, alive, standing in the afternoon light. He looked at the closed doors. Yes, he said, because we're going to make sure of it. He turned to his brothers, who were arriving now in numbers bikes pulling into the lot, the sound of engines building to a rumble that he felt in his chest. He looked at his hands. Her blood was in the creases of his palms and the lines of his knuckles, the kind that gets into the architecture of a person's skin and stays there. Make the calls, he said. Everyone. Bring what you've got. No one goes near her room without going through us. He walked through the automatic doors and did not stop until he was inside. He was not leaving until she was safe. That was not a feeling. That was a decision. And Cole Maddox had built his entire life on the difference. The parking lot of St. Mary's Hospital looked like something that had not happened before in the hospital's history by the time Full Dark arrived. 60 motorcycles arranged in the asphalt under the fluorescent lights of the lot chrome, catching the artificial light and returning it in fragments, the whole assembly radiating a low, powerful sound of engines idling and then falling silent as riders cut their motors and took up positions. More were coming. Cole could hear them arriving from multiple directions, the sound of approach building from every quarter of the city, brothers responding to the call the way they always responded, without asking for justification, without needing it, because that was what the club was when it was what it was supposed to be. He sat in a plastic waiting room chair with his elbows on his knees and his hands clasped in front of him, still dark with her blood in the creases, and he watched the door to the trauma bays and did not move. Around him, the waiting room held itself the way waiting rooms always did, with a collective held breath, ordinary disasters processing through the space. A man with a bandaged hand filling out paperwork with his good hand. A woman crying quietly into her phone, her voice dropping to almost nothing and then recovering. A child asleep across two chairs with his head in his mother's lap, entirely outside all of it. Lily was beside him, cross-legged on the chair to his right, her tongue at the corner of her mouth in the concentrated way that meant she was working on something important. A sympathetic nurse had produced a fistful of crayons and several sheets of paper from somewhere behind the desk, and Lily had been working steadily since they sat down. Cole watched his daughter draw and felt the particular quality of love that fatherhood had installed in him without his permission 7 years ago and never once offered to remove. The love that had no proportionality, no ceiling, no resemblance to any other feeling he had ever had. Viper came in from outside and took the chair on Cole's left. Reaper and Drift are running down the sedan, he said, keeping his voice below the ambient noise of the room. They pulled partial plates from a gas station camera on Campbell. Following it, Cole nodded. Hammer's got the entrances covered. 2 men each, nobody gets near this floor without going through us. The staff called security. Viper paused. Security elected not to escalate. Good. There's more. Viper angled toward Cole away from Lily. Hammer ran her information. Iris Calloway, University of Arizona Junior Fine Arts Program. He got everything available. And Viper was quiet for a moment in the particular way he was quiet when the information was not good. She's got no one Cole. Both parents' car accident on I-10 4 years ago. No siblings. Her emergency contact at the university is her academic advisor. That's it. Cole looked at his hands, at the dried blood in the lines of his palm. He thought about this girl choosing a pencil over a sandwich on a Saturday morning, going back to whatever apartment a junior art student on financial aid could afford in Tucson. No one to call if something went wrong. No one who would notice at first. He thought about the cost of that kind of aloneness. He thought about what it had already cost her today. No one, he said. No one, Viper confirmed. Cole sat with that. Then we're her people, he said, until she says otherwise. Viper looked at him. You heard me. Yeah, Viper said. Yeah, I heard you. Daddy. Lily held up what she had been working on. A figure in dark hair and glasses arms, stretched wide yellow lines radiating outward. Behind her smaller, a tall bearded figure, and a small pigtailed one. I made her an angel, Lily said, because that's what she is. She protected us. That's what angels do. Cole took the drawing carefully. He looked at it for a long time. It's perfect, princess, he said. We'll give it to her when she wakes up. When Lily said, not if. When Cole agreed. He folded it with care and placed it in his vest pocket against his chest. The evening progressed and the parking lot filled further, and Cole's phone did not stop until he silenced it, brothers. Calling from across the state, some already riding, some asking what was needed. He gave each the same answer. Get here. We don't know yet what we're dealing with. Come ready. Because they were dealing with war. He had understood that the moment he saw the sedan. Vincent Hargrove had been moving into Hell's Angels territory for 8 months, probing the edges with the patience of someone who believed that incremental pressure applied consistently would eventually produce surrender. Cole had been measured in his response, deliberate because he was not young, and he understood that wars consumed more than the thing they were ostensibly about, that the costs outlasted the conflict by years. He had wanted more time. He had wanted a resolution that didn't leave Lily growing up in the shadow of what her father had had to do. Hargrove had made the decision for him. A hit on Cole's family was not a negotiating tactic. It was a statement of intent, and that statement had only one appropriate reply. But that was for later. Everything else was for later. Now there was only this. Dr. Patricia Weston, the emergency department chief, found him at 9:15 and asked to speak privately. Cole followed her to a small office lined with medical texts and a single-frame photograph of a mountain range. She sat behind her desk with the professional composure of a woman who had seen everything emergency medicine could produce and had learned not to be easily unsettled by what walked through her doors. Mr. Maddox, I understand you have concerns about our patient. Her name is Iris Calloway, Cole said, taking the chair across from her without waiting to be asked. She's 22 years old. She's a student at the university. She saved my daughter's life today by putting her body between my daughter and a gun. Dr. Weston held his gaze. I'm aware of what happened. Then you know that whatever she needs, she gets. Cole placed a bank transfer confirmation on the desk between them, a printout Hammer had sent, and he had produced at the nurse's station. That's a donation to St. Mary's Foundation. It's a beginning. Dr. Weston looked at the number. Something shifted in her eyes without moving her face. Iris's bills, Cole continued. All of them. Current, future rehabilitation, anything she requires. I am covering it. I don't want her making a single medical decision based on what she can or cannot afford. Are we clear, Mr. Maddox? We're also clear, Cole said, his voice dropping to the register he used when clarity was the only thing required on what happens if the quality of her care reflects anything other than your absolute best. I think you're perceptive enough that I don't need to be more specific than that. Dr. Weston was quiet for a moment. Then she picked up her phone. Get me Dr. Garrett Wynn, she said. Yes, now I don't care what he's doing. And get Johns Hopkins on the line. I want Dr. Evelyn Croft's office. Tell them we need a consult, and we need it tonight. She set the phone down and looked at Cole. Iris is in surgery now, she said. The bullet nicked the subclavian artery and came to rest adjacent to the C7 vertebra. Dr. Wynn has controlled the hemorrhaging, but the bullet's placement is very close to the spinal cord. Dr. Croft is in Baltimore. If she agrees to come, she can be here by morning. She's the best there is for this kind of injury. What's the prognosis? Dr. Weston folded her hands. Honest answer, always. She lost a significant amount of blood before she arrived. The artery damage was severe. Dr. Wynn is skilled and working well, but the next several hours are critical. The spinal involvement presents a real risk of permanent weakness to the right side, particularly the arm and hand. She paused. We won't know the extent until after the intervention and subsequent recovery. Cole thought about the paint stains. The faint yellow and blue worked into the skin around the girl's knuckles. The sketchbook open on the pavement. What it would mean for someone whose life was in their hands to lose the use of those hands. Whatever she needs, he said. No ceiling. Dr. Weston nodded. I'll make the calls. Cole stood to leave, then stopped at the door. She has no family, he said without turning around. When you need a next of kin contact, you call me. My number is on the donation paperwork. He went back to the waiting room. Lily had fallen asleep across 3 chairs with her crayon drawings clutched in both hands. Viper sat still beside her so as not to disturb her, watching the room with the patience of a man who had spent considerable portions of his life waiting in difficult places. Cole stood in the doorway and looked at his daughter sleeping and thought about the 4 seconds that separated this world from the one where she wasn't in it. 4 seconds approximately. The time it had taken a girl with paint stains on her fingers to make a decision that cost her something real and ask for nothing in return. He walked to the observation window in the corridor that looked toward the surgical suites and stood there. He could see light through 2 sets of glass, the movement of figures in scrubs, the choreography of people doing precise, necessary work. He could not see Iris from here. He could only see the light. He stood at the window for a long time. Hammer appeared at his shoulder and spoke quietly in the efficient way Hammer delivered information without softening and without editorializing. Reaper found the sedan, Hammer said. Burned out in a warehouse off 16th Street. The Diablo abandoned it fast. But Drift pulled a phone from the trunk before they torched it. The encryption was basic. There are texts to a burner that traces back to a business address that belongs to Hargrove's import operation. So it's confirmed. Confirmed, Hammer paused. Reaper also located Dale Pruitt, mid-level enforcer for the Diablo known associate from the shooter's network. Found him at a house on the east side. He's been having a conversation with Reaper and Drift for the last 2 hours. Cole kept his eyes on the light in the surgical corridor. Everything Cole said, everything Hammer confirmed. Safe houses, stash locations, shipment schedules, the combination to Hargrove's personal safe at the warehouse on Grant. Pruitt gave it all up. Reaper has a gift for that kind of conversation. What do you want to do with it? Nothing tonight. Cole said it without hesitation. Tonight we stay here. The Diablo keep their houses and their product for one more night. They're not going anywhere. He finally turned from the window. Get the brothers into rotations. 2 on each entrance, 4 outside her room the moment they move her from surgery. Nobody gets within 50 feet of her without going through us. Nobody. I don't care what they're wearing. Hammer nodded. There's something else worth considering. Word's going to get out about what we're doing here. The department will send someone eventually to assess the situation. And Hargrove is going to learn the hit didn't land clean. He might try to correct that. If he sends anyone here, Cole said quietly, they don't leave. You understand me? Understood. One more thing. Cole looked at Hammer directly. Find out everything about Iris Calloway, where she lives, her situation, what she actually needs, not what she might say she needs. Do it carefully and completely. Hammer looked at him for a moment, reading the instruction past the words. Personal, Hammer said. Personal, Cole confirmed. Hammer nodded and went. Cole returned to his chair. He did not sleep. He sat and watched the door and waited the way he had waited for things that mattered throughout a life that had required a great deal of waiting, and he did not concede anything to the darkness or to doubt. After midnight, a nurse came and told him that Iris had been stabilized, that the hemorrhaging was controlled, that Dr. Wynn had done solid work, and that Dr. Croft had agreed to fly in and would arrive at 6 in the morning. Cole listened and said thank you in the way he said things when the information was better than he had allowed himself to hope for quietly without releasing the vigilance entirely. He went to the corridor window. He stood in the dark hospital quiet, the particular quiet of the small hours when the day shift has gone and the night shift has found its rhythm, and for the 3rd time in his life, he prayed. The first had been for his mother, the second for Lily in the first terrifying weeks after she was born too small. The third was now. He pressed his palm flat against the cold glass. I know how this math works, he said quietly to whatever was on the other side of the equation. I know what my side looks like, but her side is different. So whatever you're weighing right now, put it on her account. Not mine, she's earned it. He stood there a while longer. Then he went back to his chair. Dr. Evelyn Croft arrived at St. Mary's at 6:22 in the morning, looking like someone who had made 4 hours of airplane sleep work through sheer professional discipline. She was tall and silver-haired and moved with the economy of someone whose most important instrument was her attention and who therefore spent it precisely. She reviewed the imaging with Dr. Wynn in the corridor outside the surgical suite, asked 3 specific questions, received 3 specific answers, and said that the work was good and they could proceed. The surgery took 9 hours. Cole did not sit for most of it. He stood at the observation window when the corridor permitted paced the waiting room. When it didn't drink coffee, he didn't taste and responded to operational updates from Reaper and Drift and Hammer and monosyllables because he had no more than that available and did not pretend otherwise. Lily woke at 7 and ate a muffin a nurse brought her and drew more pictures. Cole sitting in his chair. The hospital with motorcycles in the parking lot which she drew from the window with the methodical accuracy of a child who takes the visible world seriously. Iris in the hospital bed this time, with a crown as well as wings. She showed each one to Cole with the solemn certainty of a child who knows that what she is doing matters and intends to do it completely. Cole looked at each one and told her it was good and meant it. The brothers rotated in and out, sleeping in shifts, holding their posts, gathering in quiet groups in the parking lot, with the low voices of men waiting for news in difficult circumstances. No one suggested leaving. That was not discussed because it was not a question. At 3 in the afternoon, Dr. Croft came out of the surgical suite and found Cole in the corridor. She's stable, Dr. Croft said. The vertebra is fused. The bullet fragments are out. The spinal cord sustained compression trauma, which we've addressed. There will be residual effects. What kind? Dr. Croft met his eyes with the directness of a professional who believes that honesty is a form of respect and delivers it accordingly. Weakness in the right arm. Possible reduction in fine motor control. The extent won't be determinable until she begins rehabilitation. In some patients with this injury profile, the recovery is nearly complete. In others, there is permanent limitation. She paused. Given the speed with which she received care and the quality of intervention, I'd estimate her chances of substantial recovery at better than 60%. That's conservative. Cole thought about paint stains on knuckles, about what it meant for a person whose entire relationship with the world ran through their hands. What does she need, he said. Time, rest, dedicated rehabilitation with someone who specializes in post-spinal nerve recovery. Dr. Croft held his gaze, and the will to do what rehabilitation demands. That part I can't provide. That comes from her. She has it, Cole said. Trust me on that. Dr. Croft studied him briefly. I'll return in 12 hours. She should regain consciousness this evening. Cole nodded. Can I see her one visitor? Brief. Dr. Croft led him down the corridor to the room where they had moved Iris after closing. The room was very quiet. The monitors made their sounds, the steady percussion of a body working, of a heart beating, and lungs expanding with the stubborn persistence of life that has decided it is not finished yet. Iris lay in the center of the bed very still, her dark hair pushed back from her face, her right arm at her side with the careful positioning of recent surgical attention. Her hands were on top of the blanket, both of them. Cole pulled the chair to the bed and sat. He reached out and took her left hand carefully in both of his. Cold. He held it the way you hold something that needs warming without urgency, just providing the heat and waiting. He told her about Lily's drawings, about the one with the crown. He told her there were currently more than 80 motorcycles in the parking lot because his people didn't know how to respond to situations like this, except by showing up, which was the only thing they knew, and probably the most important thing anyway. He told her the bills were handled and the medical care was covered, and she didn't need to think about any of that. He told her that he had looked at the drawings she made of him and Lily, and that no one had ever drawn him like that no one had ever looked at him and found that thing and thought it was worth putting on paper, that it had been a long time since he had been seen at all, really seen by anyone who wasn't afraid of him, or wanted something from him, or was assessing him for some strategic purpose. He sat with her until Viper knocked softly. Cole set her hand back on the blanket with care. You fought to get here, he said quietly. Now you keep fighting. That's the job now. Just that. He walked out. Lily was in the corridor with her stack of drawings. She's sleeping, Cole said, but she's going to be okay. Lily exhaled. Too old a sound for her face. Can I put my drawings in her room so she sees them when she wakes up? Cole looked at his daughter, at the stack of crayon pages, each one a version of Iris as Lily understood her. Heroic, winged, crowned, radiant. Yeah, princess, he said. Let's put them where she can see them. They went in together, and Lily arranged the drawings with the serious attention of someone who understood that placement mattered, considering angles, adjusting distances, making sure each one would be visible from the bed. When she was satisfied, she stepped back and looked at the woman sleeping. She's going to be surprised, Lily said, when she wakes up and sees how many people are here. Cole put his hand on his daughter's shoulder. Yeah, he said, she is. Outside past midnight, the count of motorcycles crossed 100. The staff at St. Mary's, who had made 3 attempts to have them removed, had reached the acceptance that sometimes arrives when a force of nature simply establishes itself and waiting it out becomes the only practical option. Cole's brothers were quiet, respectful of the staff and the other patients. They held their posts and ran their rotations and kept their hands visible when the occasional police cruiser rolled through to assess and then rolled on without stopping because there was no crime here. There was simply 100 men in black leather in a parking lot in the dark, standing with their people. In the third-floor room, Iris Calloway lay still in a bed that was too large for her paint stains on the knuckles of her right hand. Her fingers moved. Cole was in his corridor chair, half awake when the night nurse came out and told him. Just a small movement, possibly involuntary, but it was there noted in the chart. He went to the window. He couldn't see it from here, but it had happened. Whatever was working in that damaged space along her spine, it was still working. He put his forehead against the cold glass for just a moment. "She's fighting," he said so quietly that it was only for himself. Then he went back to his chair and waited for morning. The first thing Iris Calloway saw when she opened her eyes was a crayon drawing of herself with wings. It was on the wall directly across from the bed, positioned at a height that required someone shorter than an adult to have done the placing. The figure in the drawing had dark hair and glasses, and arms spread wide, and the wings were large and white and notably asymmetrical, one considerably higher than the other in the way of wings drawn by someone who has never needed to think carefully about whether wings should match. Around the figure, yellow lines radiated outward in all directions, the child's conventional rendering of radiance. Iris looked at it for a long time before anything else came clear. The smell arrived first, antiseptic and recycled air, and something floral that turned out when her eyes tracked to the windowsill to be yellow roses in a glass vase. Then the sounds monitors and the soft background percussion of a building and its working rhythm, the particular acoustic signature of a hospital. Then the light pale and institutional entering through blinds angled to let in the morning without the full weight of it. Then the pain which had been waiting with considerable patience at the edge of everything and now stepped forward to make itself properly known. It was not the white, obliterating heat she dimly remembered from the pavement. It was duller than that, more established, the pain of something that had been acute and was now chronic, that had settled into her body and found its permanent address, and was no longer announcing itself dramatically, but simply living there, part of the landscape. Her right shoulder, her upper back, a deep ache that went below muscle into something more structural. She tried to move her right hand. For a moment, nothing. Then at the very outermost edge of sensation, something. Not movement. Not yet. The faint electrical suggestion of movement, a signal sent and received incompletely like a station that exists, but the signal is weak and full of static. She stared at the ceiling and breathed and was careful not to reach any conclusions yet. A knock at the door, soft and considered. "Come in," she said. Her voice was her own, but barely thin and abraded from the ventilator that was no longer there. The door opened and Lily Maddox came in at a run that was clearly being held back from its full expression by instructions about not running in hospital corridors, a run pretending to be a fast walk. She wore a yellow dress today, and her hair was in one pigtail instead of two slightly crooked, the clear work of a father doing his patient best with something outside his areas of expertise. She stopped at the side of the bed and looked at Iris with an expression that held 6 weeks of worry, and its resolution simultaneously a concentrated relief that was almost physical in its presence. "You're awake," Lily said. "You're actually awake." "I'm actually awake," Iris agreed. Lily stood there for another moment, checking the evidence against the fact, making sure they matched. Then she reached out, and with the deliberate and particular gentleness of a child who has been told to be gentle and is taking that instruction with complete seriousness, placed her small hand over Iris's left hand on the blanket. "Does it hurt?" Lily asked. "Some," Iris said. "Not too bad." This was not entirely true. It was true enough, and the child's face needed it to be true enough, and Iris had always been precise about the distinction between lying and deciding what the situation required. "Daddy said you were the bravest person he ever met," Lily said. "And Daddy knows a lot of brave people." Iris looked at the crayon drawing on the wall, at the asymmetrical wings. "Did you make that?" she asked. Lily turned to assess her own work with the critical but fundamentally satisfied eye of an artist reviewing a completed piece. "Yes, the wings aren't quite even," she acknowledged, "but I think real angels probably have some unevenness too. It would be strange if they were perfect." "I think you're right," Iris said. "I made you a lot of drawings." Lily gestured toward the bedside table where a stack of papers had been arranged with some care. She came around the bed and began presenting them one at a time with brief explanations. This is you being a superhero. This is you and me eating ice cream, which we're going to do when you're better. I already decided what flavor I'm going to get. This is you and Daddy and me, and it says family at the bottom. I wrote it myself. The letters got a little big, but they all fit if you look at the whole word. Iris received each drawing in her left hand and looked at it carefully and said something true about each one. The child had real instinct for composition, even at 7, even in crayon. She placed the important things where they needed to be and let the rest organize itself around them. It was not a learnable skill. It was something you had or you didn't. The door opened again and Cole Maddox came in, and the room adjusted to accommodate him the way rooms always adjusted to Cole Maddox, a shift in the available space. Not unpleasant, simply the physical acknowledgement of a significant presence. He looked different from the market. Still large, still bearded, still carrying the settled density of a man who had spent decades becoming something that the world found difficult to argue with. But the terror she had seen in his face in those last moments before she lost consciousness was gone. What remained was something more complicated and quieter. He stopped at the foot of the bed and looked at her. "You're awake," he said. "People keep saying that." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. "How do you feel?" "Like I jumped in front of a bullet." He was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled the chair close and sat down, and the chair looked considerably smaller with him in it. "The doctor says you'll need time," he said, "and rehabilitation." She was direct about possible lasting effects to your right arm. Iris looked at her right hand on the blanket. She tried again to move it gently, asking rather than demanding. The signal made it further this time. The faintest tremor at the surface, the ghost of intention becoming the beginning of something. "I know," she said. Cole watched her looking at her hand and said nothing. He did not produce reassurance she hadn't asked for. She was more grateful for that than she had words for. She had spent enough time in the years since her parents died with people who rushed to fill silence with comfort that wasn't theirs to give comfort, that was really about their own discomfort with her situation rather than any genuine response to hers. "There are things I need to tell you," Cole said. Iris looked at him. "Your medical bills are covered. All of them." He said it plainly without preamble or softening. Current, future rehabilitation, everything. There's a rehabilitation specialist coming in, someone who focuses specifically on post-spinal nerve recovery. She'll work with you 3 times a week for as long as it takes. Iris opened her mouth. "I'm not finished." He said it without sharpness, just precision. "Your tuition for the remainder of your degree is paid. I called the Art Institute of Tucson. They have a private studio space available to advanced working artists. It's yours. There's an apartment downtown near the university. Rent and utilities covered for 5 years. And there's a trust." He named the figure. Iris's comprehension stumbled on it, backed up, tried again. She stared at him. "I don't want your money," she said. Her voice was still thin, but the clarity in it was absolute. "I didn't do it for money. I didn't do it for anything. I did it because there was a child, and there was a gun, and there wasn't time to do anything except what I did." "I know that," Cole said. "That's exactly why I'm doing this. Not because you asked, because you didn't." Iris looked at him for a long moment. He looked back without flinching, without the discomfort that most people showed when she held eye contact past what social convention considered comfortable. He had the stillness of someone for whom the question of what he was had been settled long ago and did not require ongoing management. "I'm not a charity case," she said. "No," he said. "You're someone who made a choice that cost you something real and got nothing for it, and now you're going to be alone in a rehabilitation ward trying to recover the use of your right hand while figuring out how to cover expenses your insurance won't touch." Cole held her gaze. "I'm not interested in charity. I'm interested in what's right." Iris looked at the drawing that said family at the bottom in large, earnest letters. "There are 100 men outside," she said. 107 as of this morning. He said it without expression. I could hear them. At night when I wasn't fully conscious, I could hear the motorcycles. They wouldn't leave. "Why?" "Because you saved Lily." His voice shifted just slightly, the way foundations shift before a building settles. In our world, that means something that the regular English vocabulary doesn't quite have a word for. You're ours now, whether you decide you want to be or not. Iris was quiet for a long time. The monitor held its steady rhythm. Through the window, she could see the top of the parking lot, where if she angled her head, she could make out the faint glint of chrome in the morning light. The scholarship, she said finally. And the studio space. Tell me more about those, Cole told her. He was precise, practical, laying out the specifics without performance, and she listened and asked two questions, and he answered them directly, and they sat for a while in the kind of silence that exists between people who are reaching an understanding without needing to narrate it as it happens. I have a condition, she said. Cole waited. I want to paint your people. Iris met his eyes steadily. Not the legend, not what ends up in police reports or on the news. The real version. I want access. Time in the spaces where you actually live. If I'm going to paint truth, I need to see it. She paused. I found something true at the market. That's all I'm ever looking for. If there's more truth there, I want to find it. Cole looked at her for a long moment. Then he said yes. Just like that. I know what we are, he said. I'm not afraid of someone looking at it honestly. He stood from the chair. Rest. The rehabilitation specialist starts in 2 weeks. Don't push the hand before then. He was at the door when she said his name. He turned. Thank you, she said. Not just for this. For the truck. For staying. Something moved across his face that she didn't have the word for yet. She thought she might eventually find the right image for it, the right angle of light, but she didn't have it yet. You didn't leave Lily alone in the world, he said. I wasn't going to leave you alone in it either. He went out. Lily stayed for another hour, showing Iris more drawings and explaining at some length her theory about why the hospital cafeteria's orange juice was fundamentally inferior to the orange juice at home, a detailed and surprisingly well-constructed argument that involved both taste and texture. When Lily finally left with Viper, who appeared in the doorway with the patience of a man who had been waiting in a corridor for a while and considered this a reasonable use of his time, the room felt different, fuller somehow than it had even with people in it. Iris lay back and looked at the drawing on the wall. She tried her right hand again. 3 fingers moved. She stared at the ceiling and breathed and did not permit herself to cry. Not from the pain and not from the relief, because she was saving that for when she was certain. She was going to make herself certain. That was the decision she made in that room on that morning, with the sound of motorcycle engines idling 7 floors below, and a crayon angel with asymmetrical wings watching her from the wall across the room. She was going to get her hand back, whatever that required. The next 3 days were unremarkable in the way that days in a hospital can be unremarkable, even when the circumstances are not the body doing its slow work of reassembling itself, while the mind waits and the world outside continues without particular regard for either. On the 4th day, something happened that Iris did not learn about until much later. 2 men arrived at St. Mary's in the mid-afternoon wearing maintenance uniforms. They had identification that was good enough to get them into the building through a service entrance on the south side. They made it to the 3rd floor, moving through the corridor with the confidence of people who belong where they are before they encountered the problem. The problem was Brock Sellers and a man named Warren, who went by the club name Decker, both of whom had been sitting in the corridor outside Iris's room for 6 hours, and who did not look like what they were until suddenly they did. What happened in the next 90 seconds occurred without anyone else on the floor being aware of it. The 2 men in maintenance uniforms were escorted to the service stairwell they had used to arrive, encouraged to consider the wisdom of not returning, and sent back the way they had come. Neither of them was carrying anything that could be mistaken for a maintenance tool. Viper reported this to Cole in 4 sentences. Cole listened and said nothing for a moment. Double the rotation on our floor, he said, and let Hargrove know we're aware. Hargrove's people are going to know we caught them. Good, Cole said. Let him think about what that means. Iris never learned that she had nearly been killed a 2nd time in the same week. The men who had protected her did not tell her because it was their job to have handled it, and they had handled it, and reporting it would have served no purpose except to frighten her, and she had enough to manage already. What she did learn on the morning of her 5th day was that Hammer had brought her a set of professional drawing pencils in a leather case, which he left on her bedside table without comment. That drift had produced a sketchbook, a good one with heavy paper in a solid spiral. That a man she knew only as Weston, who had an art history degree from the University of New Mexico that he had acquired before certain decisions had redirected his life into its current channels, had left a stack of art monographs with a folded note that said, "Only these seem like the kind of thing you'd want." She laughed when she read the note. It was the first time she had laughed since the market, and it arrived without warning and felt strange and then felt correct. She started drawing with her left hand. It was humbling in a specific and instructive way. Her lines came out wrong, too heavy in the application and too uncertain in the direction, without the calibrated control that her right hand had developed over years of daily practice. The instinct was intact, the eye was intact, the understanding of what made an image work was exactly where she had left it. But the instrument was wrong, and the instrument mattered. She drew anyway. The hospital room, the view from the window, which included the corner of the parking lot where she could see the edge of the motorcycle formation that had been there since the first night. The mountains in the early morning light, the Catalinas going from dark to bronze as the sun found them. Dr. Ames, her rehabilitation specialist, captured mid-instruction with the precise, focused expression she wore when she was explaining something she intended to explain only once. Lily, who came 3 times a week and drew alongside her with crayons, while Iris worked in graphite, the two of them sitting together in a companionable parallel industry that didn't require conversation because the work itself was the conversation. Lily drew things as she saw them, direct and unmediated, and Iris found that sitting next to her was useful in a way she hadn't expected. Lily didn't second guess. Lily put down what was there. The rehabilitation with Dr. Ames was the hardest work Iris had ever done. This was a significant statement given the catalog of hard work that preceded it. The scholarship applications written and rewritten and submitted and rejected, the double shifts at the diner, the 4 years of financial calculation that had to come out right every month or the whole structure collapsed. She was not a person who had been permitted to be soft, and she had not become soft. But rehabilitation was different from anything she had previously been hard about. The exercises were almost insultingly small. Squeezing a soft ball of prescribed resistance, tracing letters on a textured pad, picking up objects of graduated size and weight, and moving them from one side of a table to the other. Things she had done without awareness for 22 years, now requiring her complete and conscious attention and frequently defeating her anyway. The pain was not the worst part. The worst part was the inconsistency. Some mornings the signal from her brain arrived at her fingers with something approaching its old clarity, and she could move with a precision that felt almost like herself, and she would allow herself carefully and with reservations to see the shape of recovery from this angle. Other mornings the signal degraded somewhere in the compromised route, and what arrived was vague and unreliable, like trying to work in thick gloves that also had no feeling. On those mornings, she sat in the rehabilitation room after Dr. Ames left and looked at her right hand and told it quietly and specifically what was going to happen. She was not asking. She had learned that from someone. On the 11th day, she picked up a pencil with her right hand. Not a good pencil, not the professional set that Hammer had brought. The cheapest kind, the 10 for $2 kind she had bought at the corner store the morning of the market. She had asked Hammer specifically to get her some, and he had done it without asking why, which was one of the things she had come to understand about him. He understood when a thing didn't require explanation. She didn't want to try for the first time with anything better than what she'd had when everything started. Her hand shook. The pencil moved across the paper in a line that wandered and thickened and thinned at the whim of the nerve signals, rather than her intention, the work of hands that were relearning a conversation they had been having for years. It looked nothing like what she could do. It looked like someone else's early attempt. But it was a line, made by her right hand, moving in the direction she had intended. She looked at it for a long time. Brock Sellers was in the corridor. She had seen him through the door's small window when she came back from breakfast, sitting in the plastic chair with a paperback novel, a large man in leather reading fiction with the quiet absorption of someone who had made peace with waiting. She went to the door and opened it. He looked up. I drew a line, she said. His face did something she had not anticipated and would not forget. He looked at her with an expression that was completely without defense, entirely open, and then he turned his head away and brought one hand up to cover his eyes briefly, and when he turned back, he was composed mostly except for the parts that weren't. Good, he said. His voice was slightly rough around the edges. That's real good, Iris. She went back to the table and drew another line, then another. She drew them for an hour, filling a page with unsteady marks, training the signal to make the journey again and again, wearing a path through the resistance. When she was done, she went to the door. Tell Cole, she said. Tell him I need that meeting. Sellers reached for his phone before she had finished the sentence. Cole came that evening. He sat in the chair across from her table, and she sat at the table with the sketchbook closed in front of her, and she told him what she had decided. I'll take the apartment and the scholarship, she said, on the condition that I can repay the trust when my work sells. I'm not interested in it as a gift. I'm interested in it as a bridge. There's a difference. Cole considered this. And the studio space, I want to use it to paint the club. She met his eyes without looking away. I meant what I said. I need access, real access for several months once I'm out of here. The spaces where you actually live. I need to be in them long enough to see what's there. What do you expect to find? He asked it without defensiveness, genuinely curious. I don't know yet, Iris said. That's the point. I found something at the market that I wasn't looking for. That's usually when the real work happens. Cole looked at her. You understand what it means, he said, to spend that kind of time around the club. What you'd be seeing. What you'd know. I understand, she said. And you understand what it means to let someone look at you that closely. We're both taking something on. He looked at her for a long moment. All right, he said. You have access. And there's one more thing. He waited. When I'm better, when the hand is back, I'm not staying because I owe you anything. She held his gaze steadily. I'm staying because Lily made me a drawing that says family at the bottom, and I want to be someone who deserves that word. I want to earn it, not receive it. Those aren't the same thing. Cole looked at her for a long time. Yes, he said. I know the difference. She nodded. Good. Then we understand each other. He stood to leave. One more thing, Iris said. He stopped. What happened to Hargrove? Vincent Hargrove. She said the name, carefully testing whether she was allowed to say it. Cole looked at her. He was quiet for a moment, reading something in her face. That's being handled, he said. How? He seemed to decide something. The right way, he said, which in this case means the legal way. We have everything. Texts, financials, locations, testimony. It's going in the right direction. He paused. I made a decision about how to handle it. Iris waited. A girl with nothing to her name ran toward a gun to save my daughter, Cole said. The least I can do is try to deserve that. He went out. Iris sat at the table for a while after he left. She opened the sketchbook and looked at the page of unsteady lines she had made with her right hand. She closed it again. Outside, the motorcycles had thinned to a working rotation. A smaller number now, the acute emergency having passed into something more like a sustained presence. But they were still there. They would still be there in the morning. She picked up the cheap pencil with her right hand and drew one more line. Better than the last. Still shaky, still imprecise. Nothing like what she had been able to do on a Saturday morning in October when the world was full of color and she was watching it from a brick wall. But better than the last. She put the pencil down and looked at the drawing on the wall. The asymmetrical wings, the yellow lines radiating outward. She was going to get her hand back. That was not a wish. That was a fact she was going to make true. In February, 2 months after Iris was discharged and 4 months after the market, the FBI arrested Vincent Hargrove at his import office on the north side of Tucson on charges that included attempted murder, conspiracy, drug trafficking, and 7 other counts that the prosecution considered sufficient to ensure he would be making his decisions about everything for the next 20 years from inside a federal facility. The evidence package that arrived at the field office was comprehensive. It had been assembled with care and delivered through a channel that the agent in charge described to her supervisor as unusually cooperative for the Hells Angels, which her supervisor said she should not put in her report in those exact words. The agent rephrased. The report noted an anonymous tip and left it at that. Iris learned about the arrest from the news. She was at her kitchen table in the downtown loft drinking coffee in the morning light that came through the tall windows. At the angle, she had already learned to value the light that moved across the hardwood floors as the sun shifted and that painters spent their entire lives trying to be in the same room with. She read the article once and then closed the laptop and finished her coffee. Cole came by that evening. He didn't stay long. He stood in the doorway of the studio and looked at what she had been working on a canvas. She turned away from him out of habit before she remembered that she had agreed to show him everything when it was done. She turned it back. He looked at it for a long moment without speaking. "That's from the market," he said. She nodded. "It's the beginning of the series." He looked at it for a while longer. "Good," he said. "That's right." He left. She turned back to the canvas. The rehabilitation with Dr. Ames continued through November and December and into the new year. It continued to be the hardest work she had ever done, which was a category that kept being redefined upward. Dr. Ames was not interested in the pace of recovery that was comfortable. She was interested in the pace that was possible. The brothers came every day, or someone did, always someone, in the chair outside her room during the hospital weeks, and then after discharge available in the way that people are available when it has been established that availability is what is required. Hammer came by the apartment on a Thursday afternoon with a new set of professional brushes and left them on the kitchen counter without announcing that he had done so. Whose actual name she eventually learned was Raymond Caulfield, and who had a daughter in Albuquerque. He called every Sunday afternoon, brought her a crate of stretched canvases that he said a friend of his had been storing and didn't need, which she understood was not quite true, but accepted anyway. The man called Weston, who had the art history degree, came by occasionally and sat in the studio and talked about painting while she worked. He had opinions about color theory that were specific and not uninformed, and she found his company useful in the way that company is useful when it doesn't require you to perform anything. She spent time at this compound. Cole had made good on his word, and she came and went with the access she had asked for, arriving on weekday afternoons when the club was in its working rhythm rather than its ceremonial one. She sat in on a church meeting and drew what she found, which was 40 men arguing about the disbursement of a charitable fund they had established to support families of first responders killed in the line of duty. She drew the garage where three brothers spent their Saturdays on a running project of restoring old motorcycles that were then donated to veterans organizations. She drew Lily helping Cole wax his bike on a Sunday morning, both of them in the same posture of focused absorption, the inheritance of a habit passing across a generation without ceremony. She drew Cole in many lights and at many angles, looking for what she had found at the market, the precise, unguarded moment when the essential person was present and visible. She found it in different places than she expected. In the way he listened when she or anyone else spoke with the full weight of his attention deployed, nothing kept back. In the way he talked to his brothers directly and without performance, the authority so settled it didn't need to announce itself. In the way he looked at Lily, which was the constant that everything else organized itself around. She painted him looking at Lily in the kitchen on a Tuesday evening while Lily concentrated over the stove. She painted him sitting on the compound steps after a long day with a cup of coffee, head tilted back toward the sky, alone in the way that people are alone when they've made peace with their own company and find it sufficient. She painted Hammer at the front of a room of teenagers from the East Side neighborhood, teaching basic mechanics with the patient thoroughness of someone who believes the information matters. She painted Viper Lyle Dodd from Central Kansas asleep in a common room chair with a Western paperback on his chest, the posture of a man who is at home wherever he happens to be. She painted Drift on a video call, his voice going soft in the way it only went when he was talking to his daughter. She painted the compound garage at night with the security lights throwing long shadows across the bikes lined up in their rows. She painted the truth. That was what she had promised, and that was what the work required. Her right hand continued to come back. Not in a single dramatic moment of recovery, not in the way of stories that need a clear before and after. It came back the way the body reclaims things when it has decided to reclaim them incrementally with the particular stubbornness of biological systems that have not been convinced they are done. One morning in February, she sat down at the drafting table and drew a line, and it was her line. Recognizably, hers the weight of it correct. The control restored to something that was not what it had been before October, but was close enough to build from. She called Dr. Ames. Dr. Ames came to the apartment and watched her draw for 20 minutes in silence, and then said with the particular restraint of a professional who does not distribute compliments casually that this was better than she had projected at this stage in the recovery. Better than 60%, Iris asked. Dr. Ames looked at her hand and then at her. Better than that, she said. Iris thanked her and showed her out, and then sat down at the easel and painted for 6 hours, without stopping everything she had been saving for this every image she had been holding in reserve for when the hand was ready to make it. The opening was in April. The gallery was serious in the specific way that serious galleries are, which is to say that it showed work of genuine ambition rather than decorative ambition. And the curator, Francis Aldgate, had been doing this for 30 years with the combination of eye and confidence that produced genuine careers rather than pleasant evenings. She had seen Iris's portfolio in February and called the following morning and offered a solo show with the directness of someone who did not see a reason to introduce delay. The invitation list was composed with care. Critics from Phoenix and Los Angeles, and one from New York who was in Tucson for another opening and had agreed to extend his stay. Collectors, faculty from the university, including Professor Aldridge, who had signed 3 rejection letters whom Iris had personally invited because she thought he deserved to see what insufficient portfolio diversity looked like when it was finished. And the Hells Angels, who received their invitation 30 minutes before the official opening time so that they could see the work before the crowd arrived, because the work was about them and they deserved to see it first. They came in their leather and their boots on a cool April evening, and they moved through the gallery in a quiet that Iris had learned over the preceding months to understand. It was the quiet of people taking something seriously. She watched from the side of the room. She watched Hammer stand in front of the painting of himself with the teenagers and stand there for a long time not moving, reading something in the image that she hadn't put there consciously, but that was there nonetheless. She watched Drift find the video call painting and make a sound that he immediately converted into a cleared throat, and then looked at the ceiling for a moment. She watched Viper Lyle Dodd from Central Kansas stop in front of the painting of himself, asleep in the common room chair, and laugh a real unguarded laugh, the recognition of someone who has been seen accurately. Cole came last. He moved through the room the way Cole moved through all rooms he had decided to enter, with the authority of someone who has settled the question of his right to be anywhere he chooses to be. He looked at each painting with the same stillness he had shown in the studio in January, giving each one the full weight of his attention. When he reached the shield, the centerpiece, the painting of the market, in the morning, and the girl in the paint-stained jacket with her arms outstretched and her body angled between the child and the thing that was coming, he stood in front of it for a long time. Iris came to stand beside him. "It's not for sale," she said, "before you ask." "I was going to ask." "Still no." He looked at it for another moment. "It's the best thing in the room," he said. "I know," she said. The collectors and critics filed in, and the gallery filled with the particular sound of people encountering things they hadn't seen before and deciding what they thought about them. Iris moved through the crowd talking about the work. When people asked, which was often staying attentive to what was said about the paintings, which was almost entirely good and occasionally extraordinary. Professor Aldridge found her near the middle of the evening. He was a compact man in his 60s who had always dressed as though academic settings were formal occasions, and he stood in front of the shield for a long time before he came to find her. "I was wrong," he said, "about the portfolio, about what it was doing. Iris looked at him. I know what insufficient portfolio diversity means now, he said. It means a portfolio that shows only the things that are easy to see. He paused. This isn't that. No, Iris said. It isn't. He nodded once the nod of a man making a specific acknowledgement and went back into the crowd. She watched him stop in front of the painting of Cole and Lily at the ice cream stand. The drawing rendered in oil the tilt of Lily's head and the look on Cole's face that had started everything. The New York critic, a thin man named Aldous Price, whose standards were not negotiable and whose opinions carried specific weight in specific rooms, stood in front of the shield for 11 minutes. Iris counted, not from anxiety but from genuine curiosity about what a painting could sustain. When he turned around, she was nearby. Who are these people, he asked. Iris looked past his shoulder. Cole and Lily were in the far corner of the gallery, standing close the way they always stood, Lily's hand in Cole's. They were looking at one of the smaller paintings, the Tuesday evening dinner, Lily at the stove, with her tongue at the corner of her mouth, and Cole in the kitchen doorway, watching her with the look that didn't change the look that had been there on a Saturday morning in October, when Iris had been a girl on a brick wall and everything had been about to change forever. Cole felt her looking. He turned. Their eyes met across the crowded room, across the paintings and the critics and the collectors and the October light that she had found a way to make permanent. And he held her gaze the way he held everything that mattered, with the full weight of his attention and nothing withheld. Iris turned back to Aldous Price. My family, she said. The critic looked at Cole and Lily in the corner. He looked at the paintings. He looked at Iris. He wrote the review that night, and it ran 2 days later, and said, among other things, that Iris Calloway had done something that few artists managed in their first major exhibition, which was to make the viewer understand that they had been looking at the world with incomplete information, and that the correction was not painful, but necessary and overdue. Iris read it at her kitchen table with her first cup of coffee and did not cry, which she considered a genuine personal achievement. She put the review in a folder alongside the 3 rejection letters from the scholarship committee, because that seemed like the right company for it. Lily came over that Tuesday and made pasta from a recipe she had learned from a video online, and was genuinely excellent, at which surprised no one who had watched her approach anything she decided was worth learning, and showed Iris a drawing she had made at school of the 2 of them, standing together at the gallery opening, both of them wearing crowns. Why crowns? Iris asked. Lily considered the question with the seriousness she brought to all questions that deserved it. Because you made something real, she said, and I helped. Also, crowns look good in drawings. Iris put the drawing on the wall next to the crayon angel with the asymmetrical wings, and the 2 of them sat at the kitchen table and ate pasta and talked about the drawing Lily was planning to make next, which was going to be large and involve horses, and about which flavor of ice cream they were going to get on Saturday. A conversation they had now had 17 times over the preceding months, and which Lily considered incomplete until they were actually holding the cones. That evening, after Cole came to take Lily home and the apartment was quiet, Iris sat at the easel in the studio corner. She looked at the framed crayon drawing on the wall above it, the lopsided wings, the yellow radiance. She looked at the blank canvas on the easel. The right hand was not what it had been before October. Dr. Ames had been honest about that from the beginning, and Iris had accepted it because she had found over the preceding months that acceptance was not the same thing as defeat. The hand was not what it had been. It was something else, something that had been through something and had the knowledge of that in its functioning, the way old wood is stronger in some directions than new wood. She picked up a brush. Outside the apartment, the city made its evening sounds, the particular mixture of Tucson and April warm air and traffic, and someone's music from a window down the block. And underneath it, faint but unmistakable, the deep rolling sound of motorcycles somewhere in the city, moving through the streets, present the way they had been present since October, the way they would go on being present. She put brush to canvas and began. She had been nobody once. Invisible on a brick wall in the October sun, unremarkable, overlooked, a girl who chose pencils over sandwiches and drew the world from the outside of it, recording what she saw without anyone seeing her in return. She was not that anymore. She had a name that 100 people knew. She had a studio and a loft with light that moved across the floors. She had a Tuesday evening arrangement with a 7-year-old who made excellent pasta and had strong opinions about ice cream. She had a framed drawing with lopsided wings above her easel and a bandana from a hospital corridor folded in her desk drawer and a folder that held 3 rejection letters and a review from the New York Times. And she knew exactly what each of those things meant and where it belonged. She had not gone looking for any of it. She had gone to a Saturday market with a pencil and a sketchbook and an empty stomach. And she had been looking for truth, because truth was the only thing she had ever known how to look for. And she had found it in the face of a man who loved his daughter. And she had made a choice that cost her something real. And what came back to her in return was more than she had known how to want before she had it. The brush moved. Outside, the motorcycles kept going.